Welcome to Module 4. As always, we're going to go ahead and start with a short meditation and some affirmations. So go ahead and get comfortable and in a good position for breathing and relaxation. Otherwise, if you're not interested in this, go ahead and go forward to the next slide.
Find your comfortable seat. Begin to let your eyes soften and perhaps come to a close. In this short meditation, we are letting go of food rules, of questioning and damaging food beliefs. So I will invite in some affirmations for you to repeat to yourself. First, let's settle in with the breath, inhaling nice and deeply through the nose. And exhale, sigh it out the mouth. Now letting the breath just flow in and out naturally through the nose and letting go of anything that might be on your mind, setting it aside for this next 2 minutes. You can repeat these affirmations out loud or just silently to yourself. It is okay to experience pure enjoyment from my food. The food I eat is a privilege and a blessing. I am grateful to have access to foods that nourish my body and my soul. I am worthy of the food I fuel myself with. I will make the conscious effort to express kindness, compassion, and gratitude toward myself and my many blessings. I am grateful. I am worthy. I am compassionate to myself. Feel free to stay here as long as you like, or if you're ready to return to the space, begin to deepen your breath, drawing your awareness back in to the space around you, to your body. And as you're ready, blink your eyes open.
All right. So I realize letting go of food rules and beliefs isn't going to be as easy as listening to one meditation. But as I will remind you throughout these modules, just the awareness of any rules or beliefs is just step one and extremely important on this journey, just that awareness. So a recap from the last module, making peace with food can be incredibly intimidating. I understand that. That was something that we started with at that last module, module 3, talking about making peace with the food that maybe you've restricted for a long time. Everyone does this at their own pace, and you'll likely continue working on this for a while, even maybe throughout the rest of these modules and beyond. Diets, distraction, lack in self-care, and food variety can impede habituation. And then, as always, some important reminders about intuitive eating. It's not a diet. Intuitive eating is not rigid. There are no rules with intuitive eating. Maybe you've noticed that already. There's no rules. And permission in every aspect of your life is an important part of intuitive eating. A mantra I'd suggested last time at the end of the last module, I'm not good or bad based on the food choices I make. Again, this was a mantra at the end of module 3. I would say if there's a time of day or a place, such as maybe when you're in the bathroom, getting dressed or looking at a mirror, where you tend to have negative self-talk, consider putting sticky notes on the mirror and changing them out maybe from time to time so they don't turn into wallpaper. So this might be a mantra for you. I'm not good or bad based on the food choices I make, or anything about your body, or something positive about your body, or something to remind you that you're more than just the way you look or your body. Some people don't like mantras. Some people don't like sticky notes, reminders, and that's okay. If you're not into this, or this doesn't sound like something that would help you, that is absolutely okay. You're still really early in this journey. And if you still have negative self-talk, it doesn't mean you're failing, but instead it means if you've noticed it, you're aware of it. which, like I said, it's the first step in making a change. So be curious about the self-talk that you have and try not to judge yourself for it. Another intention that I talked about last time was making food peace. So choosing a food that you tend to restrict and working towards making peace with that food. Or if there's multiple foods, making peace with as many of those foods as you can. And I also brought up this idea of a milestone chart, which was in your workbook. Were you able to test a fear food or maybe test multiple fear foods? If this was a difficult assignment for you, I understand. Just as a reminder, it was one I assigned only if you determined that you were ready to make peace. And that was on page 74 of your workbook. This will continue to be a part of your journey during this course. If you've tested a fear food and, given yourself permission to eat that food, continue doing that. Remember to keep the permission unconditional. If you are void of diet mentality and you're fully present when you eat it, and you continue to eat the same type and flavor of your fear food, you'll start to notice habituation taking place eventually. If you're ready to move on to another fear food, go for it. You'll not have to test each one of your fear foods. So if you made that list and you circled multiple foods that you tend to restrict, there's no need to test or to, go through the steps on that milestone chart of every single one of those foods, unless you want to. But you will slowly notice as you progress from food to food that you are finding more trust in your body after each one. That brings us to the next principle, challenge the food police. This can be found on pages 81 through 107 in your workbook, and we'll be doing some of the worksheets in that workbook today during the module. Key concepts include your current beliefs about food, cognitive distortions, what are they? Curious awareness, how our beliefs affect our behavior, the spiral of healing, and the different food voices that we have. Let's start with our current beliefs. We all have different beliefs about food and our bodies. Hopefully by now, some of those beliefs have changed, but you know what? Some probably still linger. And like I said, that's okay. Let's take a moment to evaluate your current beliefs. Page 82 in the workbook can be filled out now if you go ahead and just pause and then come back when you're ready. The collective cultural voice, which gets thrown at us everywhere we go, whether it's social media, in line at the grocery store, when we see magazines, our doctor's office, girls' night out, the talk about diets, it eventually becomes our inner food police voice that lives with us constantly. As we make all food and movement decisions from day to day, we have that voice, that dialogue in our head. It kind of gets ingrained in us. We can't change the collective cultural voice per se, but we can certainly turn down the volume. So take a moment to consider where these voices first originated for you. Did they start when you were young, with a family member or a TV show? Are these voices still present in your life and taking a strong hold on you personally and your personal belief system? So where did those voices come from, and where are you still getting these ideas and beliefs from? Where are those voices still loud? For me, it's social media. I find that when I scroll through social media, especially if I haven't taken the time to unfollow some very influential followers who are not having a positive influence on my life, that a certain voice becomes louder in my head, a negative food or body voice. So I have to constantly go through and unfollow people. So that's where that food voice and that body negativity comes from a lot for me, is social media. And that brings me to a challenge for you. And I'll remind you of this at the end of today's module. I challenge you to unfollow accounts that don't bring you joy. Just like Marie Kondo says, if it doesn't spark joy, get rid of it. So for many of us, that food police voice, that diet culture voice, that voice of food and body shame, it comes from social media and these people that we call influencers who are really not influencing us in a very positive way. So go ahead and not right now, but maybe after this module or sometime between this module and the next module, go ahead and unfollow accounts that no longer bring you joy. That brings us to the next voices section of this module, or the first one, I should say, the only one, but the next one in this course. This is with Dahlia Kinsey. Dahlia is a queer Black registered dietitian, keynote speaker, and creator of the Body Liberation for All podcast, and the author of Decolonizing Wellness, a QT-BIPOC centered guide to escape the diet trap, heal your self-image, and achieve body liberation. Dahlia talked about this book with me on my podcast, and I'll be sharing a clip from that interview here. The term decolonize wellness can be broadly understood to mean an attempt to decenter whiteness in wellness spaces, to honor the complex histories of wellness practices in the communities from whom the practices were taken. When I asked Dahlia to describe decolonizing wellness, Dahlia described their version of the term as challenging what we may have been socialized to believe about our bodies, especially when we have marginalized identities, such as being BIPOC, trans, or even living in a larger body, just as some examples. Dahlia describes knowing you are enough, aligning with self-compassion, and getting comfortable feeling the discomfort. Whether or not you have any marginalized identities yourself, you can still take in Dahlia's wisdom and consider how you can start realigning with what you believe and what you know to be true about yourself. Take a listen.
Talking about decentering whiteness in our wellness, in our food preferences, in what we think is a good body, and allowing room for who we actually are, and understanding that there is no hierarchy, that the body you're in is a good body. And if that's a trans body, what you will need to feel safe and comfortable is different from what a cis body will need to feel safe and comfortable because of the world around us, not because there's anything odd or unnatural or different about your body. So even some of the heteronormativity I'm seeing as part of the fallout of colonialism, because not all cultures believed that gender is binary. So even releasing that and understanding that if you know in your heart of hearts, you were assigned no gender, because it's taken me a while to feel crystal clear on it, but that's because the language wasn't there, because it simply did not exist in English at the time. But I feel like I've been trying to explain since childhood, I didn't get assigned a gender. Like everybody keeps telling me, oh, you're a little girl. And I just feel like I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I don't know what that means. So really allowing yourself the freedom to just be, and to understand that sometimes the tools to fully show up as yourself may not even exist yet. So like sometimes I wonder, how do I project no gender when all the clothes are culturally coded to be attached to gender? And there are very few things that we see as just neutral. And even with food, how can you allow food to just be? How can you allow your body and your taste buds and your individual preferences and the comfort foods of your childhood that were laughed at school, or you were told were too stinky for the break room, how can you allow all of that to just be? And how can you drop all of that messaging that says your food's not enough, your body's not enough, your way of being is not enough? And it cannot be done in a day, because I'm constantly noticing and having pointed out to me, this is another benefit of being around people with different lived experience, is that people can reflect back to you where programming from your childhood is informing you in the present, and it's not congruent with all of your other values. It's really hard sometimes to notice this stuff on our own. So much of this healing is also going to happen in community. But that's another thing that can be challenging, if you've been trained to internalize bias against yourself, you may not have any other Black friends. You may not have any other trans friends. You may have unconsciously removed yourself from other people who you feel like almost out you as yourself. And it's bizarre when we see it done in ways linked to identities that you can see, but people still do it because the human mind is very strange.
Oh, yeah. That's for sure.
There's going to be layers, and it's going to take a while. So showing up with compassion for yourself, I think, is the most empowering thing you can do through the whole process. And then accepting that the work may never be over. I mean, you may get to a point where you're tired of working on it, and that's okay too. But there's always probably going to be another layer you could get into. I know when my therapist told me, when they said, like, what if you never find total peace with your body? Or what if you never find your quote unquote people? Because when I was really small, I used to fantasize, I'm going to find a culture or a country where I fit in. And when they presented the possibility that that does not exist, and that maybe part of the human experience is just accepting that nothing's ever going to be perfect, I felt like they just reached inside my chest, Indiana Jones style, and just ripped my heart out. I did not want to hear that. It's like the worst news ever. But I found that it's just the truth. It's that being a human is a rocky, challenging experience. And when we naturally, because life can be painful, when we try to opt out of feeling it all, we're also reducing how much we can feel all of the joy of life. So I understand from a trauma-informed perspective that we're not all ready to go all in with sitting with discomfort and feeling our feelings. And that sometimes you're going to put 2 toes in and run off for a couple of months or even years. And that's okay too. But knowing that when you don't feel it all, you don't feel it all.
All right. I love that. The end of that little portion of the interview I did with Dahlia. When you don't feel it all, you don't feel it all. And we'll talk more about sitting in our emotional discomfort in some upcoming modules when it comes to handling emotions with kindness. But let's talk about cognitive distortions. This might have been something that you are familiar with. But let me go ahead and define it for you. It is essentially our faulty or inaccurate thinking or beliefs. We're going to go ahead and discuss some examples in the following slides. But I want you to pause for a moment and think about some cognitive distortions you have about food, movement, health, wellness, your body right now. So go ahead, and we'll have more time to explore this in some upcoming slides. But what are some faulty or inaccurate ways of thinking or some beliefs that you realize are actually cognitive distortions? So those faulty beliefs ultimately affect our behavior. So oftentimes this is what it might look like. You have a belief or a thought about food or your body, and then that causes you to have certain feelings, and then that may cause you to engage in certain behaviors. And I'm going to give you an example, and this is straight from the 3rd edition of the Intuitive Eating book, an example scenario of what happens when you have a food belief or a cognitive distortion and how that might affect your feelings and then your behavior. I've been good this week following my diet. Oh, my grandma's brownies, they smell so good, but I shouldn't have one since I've been so good up to this point. The brownies get eaten anyway. Then you have certain feelings. You're disappointed in yourself. You feel sad, fearful of future deprivation for the choice that you just made. And then after those feelings, you engage in certain behaviors. You slowly eat another and then another brownie. And then you have essentially uncontrolled eating that is because of the guilt, in addition to the deprivation. So your body has been deprived of this delicious food, this sweet, this carbohydrate. So you have this uncontrolled eating because once you start eating it, it tastes so good. And then you also have this guilt piled on there too, which perpetuates the eating. You collapse on the couch feeling stuffed and continuing to tell yourself you're out of control. So in this example, the food belief or cognitive distortion are the idea that brownies are bad or that dieting is good. So that is the belief, the cognitive distortion. Brownies are bad, dieting is good. And that led to feelings of disappointment and failure once the brownie got eaten. And then the behavior of uncontrolled eating and once the brownies were eaten. So the feelings of disappointment, the deprivation, sadness, and then the behavior of uncontrolled eating and collapsing on the couch, feeling stuffed, not feeling well, feeling really uncomfortable. So the brownie was consumed knowing that this would probably be the last brownie for a while, right? We talked about this idea of food deprivation and how that can actually lead to eating more than what might make you feel physically comfortable. We talked about that back in the third module, how just the idea that we're going to be deprived of this food in the future will make us eat more of that in the moment. So we eat the brownie knowing that this probably is going to be the last time I allow myself to have that brownie. So I'm not going to stop, right? So the brownie was consumed knowing this would probably be the last time for a while we're going to consume it. Just the thought of future deprivation, plus the added guilt and shame from breaking the rules, led to the uncontrolled eating. Just the thought of future deprivation can cause one to eat past comfortable fullness without regard for how the body feels physically. Okay, so this is another example scenario that I pulled out just from my future life when I would say, greatly restricting my intake. I had a lot of food beliefs and cognitive distortions, but one of them was with regards to carbohydrates. I shouldn't eat carbohydrates during the day, especially foods like bread or pasta. Carbohydrates such as bread and pasta will spike my blood sugar and don't have any nutritional benefit. No carbohydrates would then get eaten during the day, which would lead to certain feelings first. The feeling of low energy and lethargy. Feeling of deprivation when friends ordered sandwiches or pasta and I get grilled chicken and salad. Also, a feeling of a little jealousy. And then that would lead to behavior. My body actually needs carbohydrates. So the behavior would be at the end of the night, I'd have uncontrolled eating of things such as ice cream, chips, you name it. Anything with carbohydrates, I would eat, and I would eat without regard to my actual physical hunger. Essentially, I would end up eating more carbohydrates than I would have had I just allowed myself a sandwich or an order of that yummy pasta on the lunch menu. So in this example, my food beliefs or cognitive distortions were carbohydrates during the day are bad, pasta and bread will spike my blood sugar, and they will provide zero nutritional benefit. This inevitably led me to feeling little energy, feeling jealous of my friends who seemingly without care in the world would eat pasta and bread on their sandwiches. And then almost nightly, this would lead me to the behavior of that uncontrolled eating, especially of carbohydrates. So the next time you have a food belief pop into your head, a food or body belief, this can go either way, food or body belief or distortion, I want to ask you to challenge it. So again, the first step is simply being aware and calling it out as a distortion, a belief that might not actually be true, and you need to question it, right? So challenge it, question its validity, and compare it to actual past experiences. So as I've said with regards to negative self-talk, any negative self-talk, the same can be true with food beliefs or body beliefs that are cognitive distortion. So they're kind of one and the same. This is really taking that self-talk a step further. Oftentimes our self-talk is a negative food or body belief that's actually a cognitive distortion, not always. So simply being aware of the thought is the first step. Next, label it as just that. It's just a thought. It's not true. It's a cognitive distortion. Gina said so. And then question it and challenge it. Let me give you an example based on my previous example about carbohydrates. Okay, so my food belief and cognitive distortions were that I couldn't eat carbohydrates during the day, especially bread or pasta. Carbohydrates are bad, especially bread or pasta, because they're going to spike my blood sugar and they don't have any nutritional benefit. Okay, I'm going to identify those all as cognitive distortions. They're simply not true. I'm going to challenge that thought. In undergraduate school and graduate school, I actually learned about the incredible benefits of carbohydrates for health, and there are many. Bread and pasta are actually packed with nutrients, especially things like vitamin B, all the vitamin Bs, the B vitamins, and there's several, and even fiber, potassium, magnesium, oftentimes. Yeah, so they're actually loaded with nutrients. Even if I don't choose whole grains every time, there's actually nutrients in those foods. If I have some protein or fat with my bread or pasta, my blood sugar isn't going to spike. And you know what? I don't even have diabetes. And even if I did have diabetes, those foods aren't going to necessarily cause my blood sugar to spike, especially again, if I'm pairing them with some fat or protein or even fiber. So actually, if I allow myself bread and pasta when I want it, it would probably no longer be so enticing and I wouldn't need as much to feel satisfied. So I'm questioning and challenging those cognitive distortions. So I'm going to reframe these beliefs. I'm going to reframe them based on actual past experiences. So first I question them. I call them out as cognitive distortions. I question them based on facts. And now I'm going to reframe them based on past experiences. In the past, when I've restricted bread and pasta during the day, I have experienced episodes of uncontrolled eating of carbohydrates, especially at night. I used to allow myself pasta and bread during the day without any care in the world. I never had health problems because of it. So why am I worried about it now? I used to not restrict carbohydrates during the day, and I really felt good all the time, most of the time, eating them. I was satisfied. I would leave a meal completely satisfied. And also, I wouldn't get to the end of the night and feel the need to get all the carbohydrates possible, right? So, past experiences are actually telling me that my new beliefs about food, especially carbohydrates, bread, and pasta, may not actually be true. You know what? I can, in fact, eat bread and pasta during the day because I'm going to be satisfied and fueled and healthy. So now I want you to practice this with your own cognitive distortions. Consider what you wrote on page 82 and practice questioning those beliefs and reframing them based on facts or past experiences. So just as a reminder, be curious, identify your thought as that, a thought, a cognitive distortion, challenge that thought or cognitive distortion, and then reframe it based on past experiences. So go ahead and pause and do the practice on your own. So part of self-care is self-nurturance. We've talked a lot about positive self-talk, but now we're adding in the importance of challenging food or body beliefs that you may have been brewing inside of you for years. So when you have a negative belief in the moment, whether it's food, health, or body related, you can just label it as that, a thought, and question it based on past experiences or facts. Or you can use another method called curious awareness. With curious awareness, you can place your awareness on the present moment rather than the thought or belief, or pay attention to one of your senses. This is called grounding, and maybe you're familiar with it. Pay attention to sight. What do you see? Sound. What do you hear? Touch. What can you feel? Etc. What can you taste? That might be another one. This is truly a mindfulness practice and will get easier as you continue to practice mindfulness and maybe even adding meditation to your daily or weekly routine. The idea isn't to ignore the thought, but to first acknowledge it, acknowledge that it's there, but then try to let it pass by focusing on something else. Essentially, what you don't want is for the thought to take root and affect the rest of your day or affect any good moment that you're having. So label your distortion or belief as thinking, not facts. When you have a negative food or body thought, place your awareness on the present moment rather than the thought, or pay attention to one of your sights or your senses, sight, sound, touch, smell, etc. Here's another interesting way to look at our thoughts. Body positive advocate and coach Christina Bruce, who you will actually hear from in Module 8, the module on body respect, she uses a more meditative approach to being aware of thoughts from the mind versus our deeper intelligence, our heart center. And she likes to call it the heart center, which I think that resonates with me. This is just another way of thinking about your disruptive thoughts that for me has been really helpful in my own personal journey of food freedom and body acceptance. So Christina describes how our brains and our mind have automatic thoughts almost constantly throughout the day. They're habitual, and they were actually originated as a way to protect us. But guess what? We don't need protection from those things that our brain was once trained to protect us from years and years ago. Okay. So this is actually going back far, hundreds of thousands of years ago. That's how our brains were built to protect us. So we have all these thoughts to protect us, but no longer do we need protection. So our brain doesn't need to protect us 24/7 with those thoughts, even though it's trained to do that. So our deeper intelligence, our heart center, is more open to forgiveness, calm, relaxation, and peace. Okay, if this doesn't make much sense, I want you to take a look at this list, and you can be more aware of when your brain or mind is talking versus your deeper intelligence. Your deeper intelligence truly knows what you need. Okay, so I'm going to go over this list in a second, but what do you do with this information? The same thing I said in previous slides. The goal is to simply be aware of your thoughts, not try to push them aside actively, but be aware of your thoughts and ask yourself, is this really true? Is my brain talking right now, which is more habitual, or is it my deeper intelligence, which is more calm and loving? This takes practice, and you'll probably be practicing this forever. I know I am. So let's look at these examples. When your mind or brain is talking and you have a certain food thought or a negative belief, it's more of the narrator. It's in the past or the future. So this might, when your brain is talking, it may cause, if you continue to let it fester, depression or anxiety. It's looking at the past or the future. It wants to know right away with certainty. It wants control. It's more judgmental, criticizing, planning. It wants to do something, but can't. It feels contracted, heavy, stressful. It's thinking it helps, but often it's just getting in the way. So when you notice those types of thoughts, that's when you know, okay, my brain is trying to take over right now, but guess what? It doesn't need to. I want to wait until my deeper intelligence, my heart center takes over, and I'm going to let it because it's more inspired, interested, and open. It's more calm, quiet, clear, confident, and kind. It's more open. It doesn't know the future, and it's okay with that. That is really hard. It's guided in the moment, from moment to moment. It only knows now, and that's okay. It comes from a place of inherent worthiness and value. It doesn't need to prove anything. It feels more relaxing and relieving, and it's loving. So when you're feeling tense and tight, that's when you know your brain is taking over, your mind, those thoughts that might not be true. When your deeper intelligence is taking over, that's when you feel more relaxed. So start to just be aware of that if you would like. And if you want to learn more, I encourage you to reach out to Christina Bruce. I have put her information in the resources that I sent to you at the beginning when you purchase this course. Okay, when you find yourself thinking something that has to do with dieting or a negative thought about yourself, a negative belief about your body, or a food belief surfaces that imparts a rule, and that's your opportunity to pause and reflect. Okay, so when the food police gets in the way, pause and reflect. The idea of coming from a place of curiosity, not judgment, is an integral part of intuitive eating. This might be useful as a sticky note in your bathroom, on the mirror, or on the fridge, in your kitchen. It's a reminder to be aware of your thoughts and your actions and consider where they may have come from and why you might be having that particular thought or engaging in this certain behavior in the moment. So again, awareness is key. Curiosity is key, not judgmental, not being judgmental. You may be used to diets in the linear thinking mentality of diet culture. So, for example, I'm going to start this diet today and I'm going to end once I've lost X amount of pounds. With diets, there's no room for deviation from one specific path that has been assigned to you at the beginning, as if we were robots. This diet's going to help you do X, Y, Z. Don't end this diet until you achieve X, Y, Z. Intuitive eating is different. It's a journey, not a destination. So on this journey, you'll have times when you revert back to old behavior. The difference now is that you're going to approach those times with curiosity instead of judgment. You'll work towards accepting that life is not linear, but more of a spiral. Intuitive eating allows for the spiral to zigzag and spiral, go up and down, move from left to right on your path to food freedom, body positivity, and self-care. And I think that is wonderful. So in this spiral on page 91, the loops represent movements of returning to past behavior. Again, I'm going to say it. Come from a place of curiosity, not judgment. Move away from this linear black and white thinking that if you go backwards, you're bad. If you go forwards, you're good. This spiral of healing tells you that you're going to have setbacks and that that's okay. Allow yourself permission to not always be moving forward. I feel like that just takes so much weight off your shoulders. And it did for me hearing that, like, this is not a linear program. This is something I'll be doing for the rest of my life, and I'm going to have setbacks, and that is part of the journey. There's several different food voices that may exist within you now. And on your journey, we're going to work to make these voices more positive and helpful. So, we've talked about identifying thoughts, those cognitive distortions, and what to do with them. But now I'm going to talk to you about the different food voices that are part of just being human. There's detrimental food voices, and then there's more positive food voices. When you read through this, is there one that you can identify with more? So the more detrimental food voices are the food police. They cause guilt and food worry. The nutrition informant that uses nutrition as a vehicle to keep you dieting, and the diet rebel, which rebels against the rules of dieting that have been done to death. So maybe an example of the food police would be, that pizza will make you gain weight. The nutrition informant might say, shouldn't you get whole grain bread instead of white? The diet rebel might say, you know what, I fasted today until 12, so I'm going to eat whatever I want. So rebelling against that restriction, that time restriction. Really, the goal is to move towards more of those positive food voices, such as the food anthropologist, a more neutral observer that in a non-judgmental way gives you perspective into your eating. The nurturer gets you through tough times with compassion. And then the intuitive eater voice knows what and when to eat based on body signals and body trust. Combines the positive ally voices in the two above. So a food anthropologist might say, that stomach really upset my stomach. So just a neutral observation. The nurturer might say, I was uncomfortably full after dinner last night, but I learned from it. I was too hungry when I began, so I ate past fullness. And then the intuitive eater might say, I trust my body to tell me what, when, and how much to eat. I want to take the time to explain here how that for years, I used the unhelpful voice of the nutrition informant to make people question their food choices when they weren't as superior to what they could have been. I did this to my friends, family, clients, and of course myself, but all in the name of health. I thought I was being helpful. I eventually turned my nutrition informant voice into the nutrition ally voice. This voice is much more forgiving and pleasurable. It's okay to be interested in balanced and nutritious eating, but no need for an agenda or ulterior motives. Instead, be interested in balanced eating because of how you know it will make you feel. For example, I still opt for whole grains and aim for eating more fruits and vegetables, and I suggest it to others too, but I don't suggest it in the same way as before. Before it was, you must choose this and you must not choose that. Now it's more about satisfaction, fullness, satiety, and with energy in mind. If someone chooses the white bread, it's no longer something I would deem as bad. It's just a choice. And we're going to talk more about that as we get into later modules and when we talk about gentle nutrition. So just be aware of those food voices. Which one seems to resonate in your mind more often? Page 116 in your workbook gives you a good list of things you can say to people trying to push food on you when you're full. This is an example of using your rebel ally voice. You're full, but you don't want to hurt someone's feelings. We've all been there. So for some, the goal is perfect eating or perfectly following a specific diet. As a reminder, this is a food police voice. This is coming from that voice in your head. That's a cognitive distortion. This idea that I have to eat healthy is a cognitive distortion that needs to be identified, questioned, and challenged, and also looked at based on past experiences. Past experiences, has your eating actually been perfect? And when it wasn't, were you okay? Healthy eating isn't perfect, and perfect eating isn't healthy. And again, I think this is just a good segue into our last module on gentle nutrition, which we'll get to eventually. Further learning for this module includes Body Kindness by Rebecca Scritchfield, the podcast Find Your Voice, Your Food Voice, episode 285, Living with Family Who is Diet Obsessed. So if you have family who continues to put these ideas, these food police ideas, this food police voice into your mind, what do you do about that? How do you talk with them about your journey, what you're doing now? And then Decolonizing Wellness by Dahlia Kinsey. Assignments for next time. As I mentioned, this is a reminder from the beginning of the module that I want you to go ahead and unfollow any quote unquote influencers who are no longer bringing you joy and who may be putting these food beliefs in your mind. Also, pages 96 through 99, explore the food rules you're still clinging to and where those rules originated. Page 77, continue your food peace journey and filling out your milestone chart if you're comfortable. Intentions for this module: approach food and body beliefs with questions and explore past experiences that may be able to help you change those beliefs. So question them. Continue positive self-talk, coming at your thoughts and beliefs and actions with curiosity instead of judgment. Remember, awareness is the first step in healing. And if that's all you can do right now is simply be aware, know that that is an important step and you're doing great. I hope you enjoyed this module and remember to reach out to me anytime for questions or comments.